Hey guys, what's good? It's the Tominator, and now that I've got pretty much all the negativity out of my system in that last cathartic video, let's go ahead and discuss some of the positives that can be taken away from this past weekend. While it certainly wasn't the best Olympia in recent memory, it wasn't all doom and gloom either. So, as promised, here are some of the most pleasant surprises of the 2019 Mr. Olympia. First and foremost, we gotta give it up for Hadi Choopan, who was probably the biggest bright spot of the entire event. Here's a guy who, refreshingly, actually lived up to all the hype. A lot of people weren't sure how Hadi would stack up to all these mass monsters in the open class, given that he's a relatively short bodybuilder who formerly competed in 212. But if he was lacking in body weight, it certainly didn't appear that way on stage. If anything, it was shocking to see just how well Hadi measured up, even managing to outmuscle William Bonac shot for shot. Not only did he hold his own out there and firmly silence the doubters, he arguably could have even won the whole show. Hadi Choopan was easily the most peeled bodybuilder in the open category, showing deep cuts and hard muscle quality, more reminiscent of the early 2000s than the spongy soft look that's become so commonplace today. In my opinion, his third place finish was at least one spot too low. I was honestly a little taken aback when they announced his name in third, but on the other hand, it wasn't the slightest bit surprising when he was voted the People's Champ, and I think he absolutely deserved it. So once again, hats off to Hadi for a job well done. But as good as the Persian Wolf was, probably no one was more of a sheer surprise than Patrick Moore, who came practically out of nowhere. I've been closely following the sport and covering most of the major contests for a couple years running now, and I'd never even heard of this guy before he won the California Pro back in May. One of my favorite moments is when they moved him to stand beside Cedric McMillan, and Cedric was all smiling and giving him props. It was almost like a symbolic passing of the torch from one classically built big man to another, and it was just a really cool little bit of sportsmanship on the part of Big Mac. Now, it should be obvious to anyone that Moore has a phenomenal structure and some great shape, but I figured he was simply too underdeveloped and unproven at this point to possibly crack into the top 10 at the biggest bodybuilding competition of the year, even in an admittedly depleted lineup. But damn, did Moore ever deliver. Not only did he manage to finish 10th in his Olympia debut, he probably should have been even higher. I would have had him landing no lower than 8th, and even commentator Sean Ray said he had Moore in 6th. I also found Sean's comparison of Patrick to a young Ronnie Coleman to be very interesting, and not at all unfounded. Certainly there's a resemblance to be found there, what with the taller frame, those long massive arms, and the excellent V-taper. Still, I think it's majorly premature at this point to assume Moore will be the next big Ron. Based on what we witnessed here, I just don't see him ever measuring up through the legs or back, but I guess time will tell. I'm not even sure how old this guy is and whether he still has the advantage of youth on his side in order to make dramatic improvements. I couldn't find much information about him online, so if you happen to know his background and care to share, please let us know in the comments below. In any case, Patrick Moore was a real breath of fresh air with that tiny waistline and vacuum pose. Never mind Ronnie, he actually reminded me of Brian Buchanan in that front double biceps. This level of aestheticism and shapely proportions would not be out of place even among classic physique. Were it not for the stellar showing by Hadi, I think Moore would have probably walked away with the People's Champ Award. What's clear is that he definitely seems to have earned himself a lot of new fans, and rightfully so. Aside from those two, nobody in the open class really exceeded my expectations. I was initially excited for Akeem Williams, who looked pretty sharp in prejudging, but then he regressed considerably come the finals, and the scorecard would seem to confirm that. Alright, but moving on from Open, probably the highlight of the Olympia for many of us was the awesome battle that took place in this year's Classic Physique. Unlike the Open division, all the top guys in Classic showed up in peak form. Breon Ansley and Chris Bumstead were, if not at their all-time best, close enough that it made little difference. Keon Pearson looked fantastic, and I don't think we've ever seen a better version of George Peterson. Chen Kang was a sleeper who came out of nowhere to round out the top 5, so all in all, it was an excellent lineup. What's so commendable about Classic Physique, though, is not only that everybody tends to come in conditioned, it's that they have the symmetry and aesthetics and the polished presentation to go along with it. It really is restoring the artistry of old school bodybuilding, and it's great to see. I just wish they'd have these guys hit the remaining poses so we could appreciate their physiques even more. I never understood the decision of why they got rid of the front lat spread or side triceps. Those are two of the most classic poses there are in my book. Anyway, there's a couple more things to praise before we wrap this up. I thought the commentary crew, for the most part, did a bang-up job. I really enjoyed listening to the insights provided by Neil Hill and Sean Ray, two industry insiders who obviously have a lot of pertinent knowledge and experience between them. In my opinion, Sean has one of the best critical eyes there is, and if you keep an open mind, you can really learn a lot from what he has to say. Even the new guy, Tim Wilkins, had some solid contributions and a great sounding voice for commentating. In fact, I didn't even notice the atrophy in William Bonac's left leg until he pointed it out, so yeah, good job by the commentators. Another thing that no one seems to be mentioning is the live stream. Crummy as the quality and lighting might have been, can we just acknowledge for a second that at least we were able to watch it? Now, I was lucky enough to have been there live last year, so I didn't need to rely on the webcast, but it sounded like a total shit show. I don't know about the rest of you, but speaking from my own experience, I only encountered 2 or 3 brief stutters here, but otherwise the online stream this year was pretty smooth. And finally, the last thing I wanted to say was that it was pretty cool getting to watch 3 new champions be crowned. How often does that ever happen? Brandon Curry, Kamal El-Garni, and Chris Bumstead all seized their respective titles for the first time. And it has to be said, all of them were deserving champions, whether you personally agree with the results or not. So from that perspective, it was a pretty memorable year. Okay guys, that's going to do it for this one. Hopefully this kind of balances out all the heavy criticism and negativity from the last video. I always try to present both sides of the coin, the good and the bad, because that's really the only way to be fair and objective and present the whole picture. Thanks for watching as always, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more. Until next time, this has been the Tominator signing off, and I'll be back!